When getting into pagan practices, I think it's all too common we focus too much on the Germanic, or too much on the Viking Age specifically, or the warriors, or the glory, the shield walls, the long ships, the high mountain fjords. But what I like to focus on when researching into pagan practices is the beliefs and practices of the common folk. The people who lived and died in the same piece of land that they were born in. The people with the unextraordinary stories. The people that couldn't afford for skalds and writers to record what they did in their lives. Because these are the practices that most of us should be following today. And the practice I believe has survived the best throughout Christianization and modernization of this world is the belief and veneration of house spirits. So why don't you go ahead and grab yourself a cup of coffee, maybe even a horn of mead, and join me in discussing house spirits as they survive today in modern pagan practices. Now, before we really get started in this video, I do want to take a brief moment here to recognize that within the pagan media world and within pagan interest in general, house spirits is not at the top of the list. In fact, it's probably very low. In fact, it's probably so low that I doubt this video will actually do that well. But I still want to make it because truly my thesis, my theory, and what I want to talk about when it comes to paganism as I move forward is more subjects like this, because this is what I think the pagan, Norse pagan world needs, is more conversations on the obscure. So if you want to make sure that this work gets out there, it has never been more important to like, share, and all that good stuff when it comes to videos such as this. Even commenting, liking, yeah, all that stuff. Make sure this video gets shared out there as much as you can. And if you want to support me as a creator and talking about these obscure pagan subjects, please think about heading down below to Patreon and supporting me there. Truly, I want to continue to have these conversations, but I do have to make content that gets out there, that spreads the word more, that appeases the algorithm gods. And so if you want to make sure I can make more content like this, please think about heading down below. It means so much, and truly it's the only way I'm able to continue to do this. So thank you for whatever help you're able to provide this channel and this content. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this conversation on house spirits. Now, before we get into the actual veneration and how to honor your house spirits within your own home, we need to talk about the history, of course. And the history of house spirits is absolutely fascinating because they exist in almost every culture on the planet, which I absolutely love. Because that means that no matter where these people came from, no matter if they were from North America, South America, Europe, Asia, somewhere, somehow, people had concepts of little spirits that exist within your domicile, within your home, that affect the life that you live, whether or not you honor them or give them offerings or appease them. And I found that, for the most part, the distinction of what a house spirit is very similar across cultures. And I'm going to share with you the many different examples we have. But first, there is a slight difference. Now, this mostly seems to come from the Greek and the Roman, but there is a distinction between a house spirit and a house god or goddess or house deity. Now, as far as an example of what a house deity is, that comes from the Greek in Hestia. So Hestia is the goddess of the hearth. And I saw a really cool thing online talking about how a way to honor Hestia in the past was to take the fire from, a hearth at the home, and then if you spread to a new colony or you established a new home, you would take the fire from your home, like an ember or a torch, and you would carry that to your new home to light the new hearth. That's awesome, and I really love that. The idea of a fire roaring in a house being the heart of a home, and then you take some of that fire and move it to your new home. And it even grew to the size that whole villages and towns would do it. They would have a central hearth within the town, a central fire that they kept lit, and then they would also take flames from that and spread it around. I just love that. It's such a cool concept. And so it definitely seems like when it comes to deities or house deities, it's a little bit more intense or a little bit more grand, whereas when we get to the house spirits, it's a little bit more individualistic within the home. Now, as far as the Germanic or the Nordic equivalent, we don't have a lot of what a house deity would be like. The closest thing we would have would be probably Thor or Sif. Thor specifically was labeled by Snorri as the god of the hearth. And then therefore it kind of drags Sif along with that, just because we don't know that much about Sif outside of her golden hair. And then of course, as we mentioned with Autumn, the connection to wheat. Sadly, there's not much to look into here. I will say within Myths and Symbols in Pagan Europe by H.R. Ellis Davison, one of my favorite books that I own on Norse paganism and Germanic paganism, there is a mentioning of a central pillar in the house that was moved from house to house, and if you moved homes, you would take this central pillar with you along the way. So much so that actually people, when they migrated from Norway to Iceland, would take these central pillars with them to their homes in Iceland to reestablish them. So while it's not exactly the hearth, this concept of moving some central element of your home with you when you move does seem to be a concept that travels with it. And so again, this idea of a house deity seems a little bit more grand. Alright, now let's actually talk about house spirits themselves. What makes them different than the house deities? And again, like I said, it's a little bit more local, a little bit more to your individual home. So I think the best way to actually go through this is just to show you the long list of house deities, the different names, and the components that make them unique to themselves. And so this will be a decently long list, but in the end we'll say, okay, here are the things that are very common between them. So to start off this list, let's go with one of the more commonly known ones that many people actually might know when coming into this video, and that's brownies. And no, I'm not talking about the chocolate cake that goes great with a scoop of ice cream. Actually, the best way to think about brownies are the elves from Harry Potter, because this is what J.K. Rowling actually based the elves on in her writings. There's even an idea if you give your personal household brownie a sock or a glove or, underwear, that they will leave. So the same idea behind J.K. Rowling's elves as well. A common theme we're going to see throughout the individual house spirits is the idea of a positive and a negative one, or a good or an evil one. And typically it seems like the bad ones exist within nature, where the good ones exist within your home. So they're like two different subsects of different elves or brownies or house spirits. And so the one within your home can be mischievous, or it can be helpful based on how you honor and venerate it, or how many offerings you give it. And so if you're having problems around your house with chores that you need to give to that spirit, and that's definitely something we see within brownies, is they could be helpful to you, they could help you with your chores, spiritually protect your home, or they can cause a little bit of mischief. Let's take a little bit of a journey to our next house spirit on this list, and that is the Domovoy, which comes from the Slavic region. Now, the Domovoy is a little bit more particular on what it likes. So it fulfills a lot of the similar roles to the brownie, is that it actually helps with chores if it is appreciated, and then it actually hurts the home if it's not appreciated. But there also seems to be a very specific role of a ritual when you leave the house or when you move into a new house, because the Domovoy doesn't actually travel with you. It's stuck in the actual home, so you can't move it like you would one of those house deities, so it actually is fused into the building. And so when going into a new building, it's kind of customary within Slavic tradition to give an offering or to acknowledge the Domovoy that lives there. And when you move, you're also supposed to acknowledge and honor the Domovoy when you leave, so it can actually still protect the home and not harm the people that move in after you. And it could also even be pissed off if you don't honor it when you leave. And so there definitely seems to be more of a concept of honoring the individual being within the house. And this is where we see the Domovoy or the house spirit being connected to a solid piece of property within the building. Now, let's finally travel a little bit further north to the Nordic countries. So we actually have a few different ones here to talk about. The one you might have actually heard of, because it's a pretty similar title to Landvertir, is a Husvitir or Husvitir, I believe it would be pronounced. And again, this is basically a Landvertir's counterpart. And it's just a spirit that exists in your home. I couldn't dig up too much individual details about this, of how it might be different than something else. But again, you have a Landvertir, a spirit that exists in nature, and then Husvitir, literally a house spirit, a spirit that exists within the home. Now, there seems to be more information specifically on the Nisse, but they're actually a little bit different than the other ones we've been talking about. They definitely fulfill a little bit more of the house elf or the Dobby elf role from Harry Potter, and similar to the Brownies, because they're described more as Santa's elves. They're described as very small, helpful in certain cases, mischievous in others. Now, interestingly enough, Nisse are actually one of the origins of garden gnomes, because that's what they kind of look like. And so garden gnomes is something that here in the West, your grandma would even have a garden gnome, but it's something that, comes from this Nisse, the Nisse spirits. And, so if you go to Scandinavia today, you're still going to find garden gnomes, these Nisse that you can purchase and buy. And while I'm sure many people that still use them and decorate their house with them have no idea of their original usage. And so originally these were sculptures meant to honor the house spirits that could help you with chores or negatively impact you if you didn't honor and respect them. Now, we do need to have a larger conversation about the conversion period as far as how these house spirits survived conversion into Christianity. And Nisse are obviously a very good example of this, as the Nisse image is still very widely known today. However, we need to talk about kobolds in Germany, and this is where we're going to get a little bit more details about the Christianization of house spirits. So when you actually Google search kobolds, you mostly pick up the kobold from World of Warcraft and kobolds within Dungeons and Dragons. But kobolds within German mythology, within German folklore, are the house spirits. Again, they tend to take on several different images. I have seen them that look more like garden gnomes, but a little bit more troll-like. You know, they have more cartoonish features, bigger noses, a little bit more gremlin-like, a little bit more Germanic in general. And the same deal here, you know, if you honor them, they'll help you clean your house. If you negatively impact them, they will negatively impact your home and mess around with things. This is how you lose your socks, people. You don't honor your kobolds. Now, this is where we get more evidence of effigies being carved to the house spirit to honor them and as a central place of veneration. And so kobolds, again, are something that you can still find today throughout Germany for sale. Again, people may not know exactly why they use them. It's just a cultural thing at this point. But originally, they would have had pagan origins and even religious practices, or at least spiritual practices around honoring them. So kobolds are actually where I found the most information about Christianization. There was a pretty lengthy article I found online talking about how when Christianity came into Germany, they of course outlawed the worship of house spirits and kobolds, and it didn't last very long because people were so ingrained and used to doing it that they actually fought back. This was one of the few pagan practices that people said, no, we're going to continue to do this, and the Catholic Church had no way of actually stopping it and actually accepted it, and it moved it more into a modern Catholic practice. And so there may not be a religious component to it now, or at least has it moved to Christianity and Catholicism, but there originally was. And I imagine most of the veneration of a kobold today is very similar to veneration of a kobold of the past. All right, so let's wrap up this section here talking about what we know historically from the long list of house deities. Now, I mostly kept my research to European, but like I mentioned, they're all over the world. I even saw that there was an entire sect of religion in Korea that honors house spirits. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'll leave it down here. I really found it fascinating that there really was this entire religion base, I think it still exists today, of honoring house spirits within Korea. So house spirits are just something that exists throughout our human concept and understanding, or at least through many of our world cultures. And so that definitely leads me to believe that all these individual tribes and people groups that may have never talked to each other actually witnessed or acknowledged these powers, so much so that it even survived Christianity. And so really you have those two different types. You have the gods that you can venerate within your own home. So if you are within Greek polytheism, Hellenistic polytheism, Hestia could be a deity for you to look out for. But even within the Nordic concept, we may know less about it, but Thor and Sif could be great deities of the hearth and follow very similar veneration as far as moving a flame between fires, which is something we've even done within the Fellowship of Northern Traditions. Now, as far as the house spirits themselves, they definitely seem to be a little bit more of an elf-like creature, usually represented as small beings that can be shown in effigies carved around the house, and then you leave them offerings of table scraps and, small little offerings of food in order to maintain the serenity of your home, and so that they can, help you clean and maybe not steal your socks so much. So with that, let's go ahead and discuss how to honor and venerate the house spirits today, even within your own home. Now, I think the most logical option is to create a small space on your altar within your house to honor these house spirits. But hopefully, as you can tell, my altar has gotten a little bit crowded as of late, and I may need to upgrade it once again, even though I have stuff literally everywhere here. So I don't think I'm actually going to set up my house spirit here on my own altar space, because this is typically for the gods. I have Odin there, Thor, I have a Vanir spot, some ancestral spots down there with gifts from people in the community, offerings I leave, and so I think it's just a little bit crowded here. Now, I do want to mention while I'm here, actually, so this Thor spot, and this is, a practice I have done for a while now, and that is honoring Thor before I leave my home for travel. So anytime I travel for more than a couple of days, I come here and I leave a beer for Thor, next to his statue. I light a couple candles, and I ask him to protect my home while I'm away. And so far, he's been pretty good about it. So I think this is a practice you can bring in with the idea of a house deity, is giving offerings to Thor, god of the hearth, before you leave your home. And it's just, another layer of security, at least spiritual security. I don't think he's going to stop a burglar, but you never know. Now, of course, another option would be actually just to honor a deity or the house spirit at your own personal fireplace, if you have one. Now, even though I have one, I'm sure I actually already got hate in the comments because I don't use real wood here, and that's because I can't, because legally, this is not like This is a cheap apartment fireplace, and they don't actually allow you to use real wood here. You have to use like these fire-safe logs that you buy in mass. And so it's my only option here. And so I don't really like to give offerings because the ventilation is not the best. And, you know, it's a very small fireplace, and so to actually give offerings into this fire that aren't like poems that I write, I think is a little bit sketchy. And so the situation may be similar to you, is that you may not actually be able to give offerings into the fire of your home, but nonetheless, a fire in the house, a hearth as a central point of spiritual veneration, even to a deity or to a house spirit, can be a really good idea. Just make sure you follow the rules and safety of your own home and what is best for you. Now, as far as where I want to set this up for my house spirit, I'm actually going to do right here. I got some candles set up right above my fireplace, right above my hearth. And again, I don't have an effigy. Maybe I'll carve one eventually or purchase one. But that is a really great option. It seems like this is a very common practice. Even within the Domovoy, there was an example of an effigy being carved to a house spirit. And so you have many cultures carving effigies or having effigies within their house to honor a house spirit. But if that's not an option for you, like it is for me, having a spot that you designate, this is for a house spirit, this is for the spirit of this house, is going to be a really good option. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this set up a little bit, really nice for them, and I'm going to have a little space for the house spirit of my home. Okay, I am actually very happy with this. Mostly the owl. So I was kind of just running through my house, seeing what things from my travels, because I have just so many knickknacks around now from all the gatherings and places I've been to. So I wanted to create something that kind of resembled my journey while also symbolizing the home. And I am very happy with the results. So I have this little guy here. Speaking of effigies, I bought this while in Germany, and I absolutely love this little guy. It's just a little owl drinking a beer. And so, it's cutesy, it's fun, and I think that's the thing. This is a very light thing. This is not a very heavy pagan subject. This is something that is light, it's joyful. Again, it comes from the people that were not warriors, or, most likely weren't warriors, or living these big dramatic lives. This comes from the people living the everyday, and so having fun with it, I don't think is a problem at all. So I'm going to put this little cute owl guy drinking a beer I got in Germany right there. And again, it's connected to Germany, so the Kobolds there. And so as far as offerings, when it comes to giving offerings to these deities, I get so many questions on the intricacies of offerings. And so I would highly recommend not putting anything here that spoils just because of your modern conveniences, because of just convenience in general. I mean, one of the things I was reading about the Domovoy specifically is the sprinkling of blood around the perimeter of your home to acknowledge the spirit of the Domovoy. And we just live in this modern era where sprinkling blood on the carpet is not going to be a good idea. And so the same goes for your offerings. I wouldn't necessarily put anything here that would spoil. I would put things that would either not really decay or decay very calmly and not smell bad. So I decided to put peanuts here because I used peanuts in a recent pad thai dish I made, so I had some extras. So leaving a little bit of extra for the spirit of my house, for the kobold, for the Domovoy, for the Nisse, for whatever you want to actually call it. The spirit of my home right here has a little bit of an offering. And it's something that, honestly, if I forget about as far as the offering, it's not going to spoil and not going to go bad. And again, a very common question I get all the time when it comes to leaving offerings is, what do I do with it after a long time? And so if I do my best to leave offerings out into nature. And so if I pour out some alcohol, after a couple of days, I'll take it to a tree and pour it out. And same thing with these peanuts. They're unsalted, so I'm just going to take them outside and leave them in the woods somewhere at some point, or take them with me on a hike and kind of recycle them. But it's here for the time being for this house spirit, to acknowledge the house spirit. And that is one of the most important parts about house spirits, is the acknowledgement of them. And so they can stop stealing your clothing, your socks, and maybe help you a little bit with the household chores. Now, one of the last things I want to share with you here is something a little bit more modern and contemporary, which is why I'd moved to a more modern contemporary space. So this is something that is purely from my own exploration. So recently I got a job working as a bartender, once again, only part-time, in order to help raise funds for the hall. So 50% of all the money I make at this bar are going towards the hall. And so here, I just been putting in an envelope and then donating it after a couple of days. And so far, I think I've already raised $500, $600 for the haul from tips, just working a few days a week. So it's something I'm really passionate about, but something I really wanted to do going into this was to sprinkle a little bit of pagan elements into bartending, because I mean, this is something I've been doing for years. The hospitality business I've been doing since I was 15, and so I really just wanted to have fun with it. And so something I've been doing when working at this bar is leaving offerings for the house spirit there. I mean, it's a pretty generic place. There's nothing really that fancy or special about the place I've been working. And so, you know, going in here, and I've just been leaving a little bit of cup of grenadine behind the bar. So I leave it there every shift. I pour a little bit of grenadine or some simple syrup, you know, because, you know, in the past I would leave honey, you know, honey or, you know, maybe wine. And so I wanted to do something simple. And so I just leave a little bit of cup of grenadine behind the bar. And at the end of the shift, I just go to a tree out back and I pour it out. And I sit there for a moment and acknowledge the house spirit of that building, because I mean, it doesn't say in anything that a house spirit wouldn't exist in a modern contemporary building. You know, it's hard to imagine one existing in a house, you know, in an office space, but in theory they could exist. You know, we really have no evidence in the past of what this would be like, because nothing like that existed. And so I just wanted to explore it, you know, this modern pagan exploration of, I'm going to give an offering to the house spirit of the generic bar I work at and see what happens. And so far, I can't complain of the results. I think I've had a really good steady stream of income from there, you know, even though I only work weeknights. You know, the other night I made good money and, you know, had really good customers, and I've been able to talk about the Fellowship of Northern Traditions, been able to talk about, you know, religion in a non-preachy sense. You know, it's been a very organic experience talking with guests, and it's just been a very humbling experience working there to work for a greater cause, to work for the community, and know that the majority of the money I'm making is going towards the land. And so to also have that moment of gratitude with the house spirit, to thank the house spirit, I think has just been really great. So whether or not there is a house spirit of this generic bar I'm working at, I don't know, but it's still that acknowledgement of taking those few moments every shift to thank the spirit of the building, to thank the spirit of hospitality for allowing me to be there, for the gratitude, to thankness, for thankfulness. And so, again, it might not have any true religious value, but it has an effect on me because it makes me more grateful for everything that happens to me there. So I just wanted to share that with you, even though it is very modern and contemporary. These are the things we have to do as pagans now, is explore these concepts our ancestors never even thought of. And so pouring a little bottle of grenadine out every single day for my shift at the bar may be a modern exploration, but I think it's something that it has had an impact and maybe even honors the house spirit where I'm at. Alright, so there you have it. A very in-depth video, I hope, into house spirits of the past and how we can honor them today. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. It's been a lot of fun to make, and I love the research because truly this is something that I think needs to be talked about more. House spirits, honoring the spirit of your home. And I just feel good, like making that little thing up there with the little owl, like everything just came together so good. And I honestly can't wait to, give offerings there and reflect on thankfulness and gratitude of having a place to live, of having a fire to keep me warm, of having food in my belly, and being thankful for when my socks show back up because I'm giving offerings to the house spirit, right? I'm missing a lot of socks. How has this happened? It's always the ones that are only like ankle high. Those are my favorite ones, and they always disappear. Anyways, I thank you once again for joining me for this video, and all these names coming down right here are the amazing people who support this channel to ensure I'm able to go a little crazy as I talk about house spirits to all of you. So like I said earlier, if you want to join these lists of people going down here, please think about heading down to Patreon and supporting this page. It's the only way I'm able to continue to do this, and it's just one of those things that makes me so humble to be able to be a YouTuber, to be able to talk with all of you, and to talk about things such as house spirits, which are just so amazing. Truly, I'm humbled and grateful, and thank you once again. Until the hall, go honor your house spirits, and skull. Oh, gracious spirit of my house, thank you for your love, for your protection. Thank you for allowing me a place to rest, for a place to rejuvenate myself. And I hope the small gift, these peanuts, show my love and appreciation for all that happens here and for your protection of my house. We do have an issue, though, my friend. Please stop stealing my socks. I look so weird walking around with Mitch-Mac socks, especially at the gym. Have you seen me? I look like a hobbit. I need all the street cred I can get. So if you could, please allow the return of my socks. What was that?
My socks.